And so how has that impacted your profits, your margins?
Nobody is making money in Bangladesh in the government street. Those days has gone.
Rahidul Haider in Dhaka. And finally, an American teenager who bought a basketball jacket from a second-hand store for $3.07 has just sold it at auction at Sotheby's for nearly $90,000. Quinn Brown was rummaging through a bin of clothes when somebody threw a yellow Los Angeles Lakers jacket into it. The jacket had Chamberlain written on the back, and it turned out to be an original, worn by one of the sport's all-time greats, Wilt Chamberlain, during the 1972 NBA Finals. Sotheby's sold it for $89,600. Not a bad return for a morning's rummaging. That's it from this edition of World Business Express. My name's Gideon Long. Thanks for listening.
This is the BBC World Service, asking what happens when a law designed to protect children also criminalises teenagers.
India has some of the strictest child sex abuse laws in the world, but it's led to some teenage boys in consensual relationships facing prison.
This is a subject which has to be handled very, very sensitively.
Love on Trial, India's Age of Consent controversy, Thursday at 8:30 and 19 GMT. At bbc.com, from our own correspondent.
The people versus the powerful property developers in one of Europe's poorest countries. We hear why so many Albanians have been rallying against a luxury tourism plan linked to the Trump family, and why they've been waving pink flamingos to press their point.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Hello, welcome to Outside Source on the BBC World Service. I'm Luke Jones, live again in our global newsroom in central London. We will take you back to Washington, D.C. shortly. In fact, on some of our screens here, I can see a live shot of one of the entrances. Lebanese and Israeli officials met last week to discuss this fragile deal each signed last month after Israeli troops moved into Lebanon's south to fight Hezbollah. And fragile is the word. The Lebanese army reported that Israeli troops fired near its soldiers deploying in a so-called pilot zone that Israel is to withdraw from, and Lebanon for their part is under pressure to prove that they can and will disarm Hezbollah, which Israel has set as a precondition for ending its occupation in the south. A complicated situation, one which Donald Trump is going to wade into shortly when he meets the Lebanese president, who is in Washington DC. We will hear from two of our BBC expert colleagues after the latest BBC News.
BBC News with Govinda Gill. Health officials in Gaza say an Israeli airstrike has killed 6 members of the same family in Gaza City. It's part of a wave of intensifying Israeli attacks across the Palestinian territory, despite an ongoing ceasefire. Israel said it was targeting a Hamas militant without providing evidence. Earlier, the United Nations condemned the intensifying strikes, which it said had killed almost 60 Palestinians in a week. The UN human rights spokesperson, Tamim Al-Kitan, spoke at a press briefing in Geneva.
The Israeli military has intensified its attacks in Gaza in recent days, killing and injuring dozens of Palestinians, children, women and men. These attacks have struck residential buildings, at least one tent sheltering internally displaced people, and other crowded areas.
Kuwait says Iran hit several power generation and water desalination plants as part of continuing attacks across the region on Monday. Fires at a number of facilities have been put out and the damage is being assessed. Residents in Kuwait are being urged to reduce their use of air conditioning as the electricity grid continues to be targeted. Donald Trump is meeting Lebanon's President Joseph Aoun shortly to discuss the implementation of a framework agreement to end the Israeli conflict with the Lebanese group Hezbollah. Earlier, the Lebanese army began deploying forces to a village in the south of the country under a US-brokered plan whereby Israeli forces are gradually replaced by Lebanese troops who'd then disarm Hezbollah fighters. As the deployment started in a so-called pilot zone, the Lebanese army said Israeli troops opened fire near its units. From Beirut, here's Karine Torbey.
It's a very bumpy and long way ahead, and people here are observing, but with a lot of apprehension and also skepticism about whether this whole scheme of pilot zones is going to be implemented and whether all the uncertainty and confusion surrounding them will be in any way clear.
A court in India sentenced 44 Somali nationals to life in prison for hijacking vessels in the Gulf of Aden 2 years ago. Richard Kagoe reports.
Handing down the sentences, the judge said the men had committed serious crimes, including using hostages as human shields, threatening to kill them and demanding ransom. The court rejected their plea for leniency after they said they were poor, uneducated and with families to support back home. Prosecutors argued they had committed terrorist acts by opening fire on Indian warships and deserved the harshest punishment. The men were arrested by the Indian Navy in 2 separate operations in March 2024 after hijacking a Malta-flag bulk carrier and an Iranian fishing vessel off Somalia's Red Sea coast on the Gulf of Aden.
BBC News. The opposition Fidesz party of Hungary's former Prime Minister Viktor Orbán says that state prosecutors have raided the centre housing their data servers. Fidesz said on social media that prosecutors intended to seize their communication system and database. Mr Orbán and his party were swept from power in elections in April. Turkey's opposition leader Özgür Özal says he's forming a new political party after a court removed him from the leadership of the main opposition, CHP. In a fiery farewell address to CHP lawmakers, Mr Özal said the country stood at a historic crossroads and said his new party would become the major opposition force in parliament. He's emerged as the biggest challenger to President Erdogan after the jailing of Istanbul's mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. The European Commission has cancelled a €2 million grant to the Venice Biennale over Russia's presence at the world's biggest contemporary art show. A Commission spokesman